Okay, I think we are live, Himanjali.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm Himanjali from Simon and Schuster, India. I'd like to introduce all of you to this book which we've just published. It's called The Age of Anxiety, and it's a third and final book in the Mindscape series, which we've been publishing for the last couple of years. And I have to say, the publication of this book, Age of Anxiety, is extremely timely. It is an important book for the difficult times that everyone is going through. So, on this panel, we have, of course, the authors Amrita Tripathi and Kamna Chibbar, and also three of the contributors to this book, Ayushi Khemka, Dr. Shobhitra Pathare, and Raj Mariwala. I'll just do a quick introduction of the panelists. So, Ayushi Khemka created Mental Health Talks India 3 years back. She's also a PhD scholar working at the intersection of gendered violence and social media. Dr. Shomitra Pathare is a consultant psychiatrist at Ruby Hall Clinic, Pune, and director, Center for Mental Health Law and Policy. Raj Mariwala is the director of Mariwala Health Initiative, which funds various mental health related projects in India. And Kamna Chibbar, who is the co-author of this book, Age of Anxiety, heads the mental health for the Department of Mental Health and Behavioral Sciences at Fortis Healthcare. And Amrita is also, is of course, a moderator for the evening, and she's also the co-author of Age of Anxiety and the author of the Mindscape series. Amrita is a writer, a former news anchor, and the founder director of the Health Collective, a site dedicated to raising awareness on mental health and illness in India. I'll hand over to Amrita, and Amrita, you can take this forward.
Thanks so much, Himanjali, for the introduction and, of course, for kicking off this entire series with us, the whole Simon and Schuster team. I think I just want to start by acknowledging that it is an unbelievable moment that we're here with our panelists. Thank you all for taking the time out to be with us despite all that's happening. And for those of you who are watching or may watch a recording of this, COVID-19 has been a wrecking ball, I think, just across the country, across the world, and we understand that there's just so many things to deal with right now. We thought long and hard, actually, about whether we should do this chat now, push it for a while. Obviously, the book has been in the works for more than a year, but the timing seemed a little bit off. I'm just going to rope in Kamna here, the co-author on this book. Kamna, one of the reasons we wanted to do this have this conversation rather is precisely because so many people are talking about anxiety, situating that obviously within the circumstances we're dealing with. Do you want to share a few of your thoughts on what we're seeing around us and some of the points that people might find helpful?
Unprecedented times, I think that's what we need to start with. We're all aware of the kind of situations people are facing. I think every day when we start our clinical work, I'm sure Dr. Pathare would agree with this as well. All you're hearing about, when you're working with your patients, when you're working, connecting with anyone. I work in mainstream healthcare as well, and it's all about worry, anxiety, the future, how things will unfold, how do we stay safe. There are a myriad of stories all around us, which are forcing us to reflect within our own selves, to find that little spirit of hope, a little spirit of optimism also, to be able to support all of not just our own selves but people around us. And the whole idea of writing this book, bringing this to the fore at this point in time, is to be able to provide at least some tools, some ways in which people may be able to take care of themselves and perhaps even guide others around, to be able to manage the varying thoughts, the varying situations that they're going through right now. And I think it's a circumstance that we all need to come together as a whole, as a collective. We need to find that little bit of energy, spirit, drive within our own selves to be able to connect to people around us and support them. When I talk to a lot of people, they talk about the guilt of being fine, and how that makes them feel. And the one thing I keep telling them is that when you are looking at people around you who are struggling to maintain and take care of their own selves, their safety, you know that you need to be fine right now so that you can also support them. And I think that's why some of these books are going to be very, very important in this time period, so that we can provide that much needed help and support to all people around us who are currently struggling at this point.
Thanks, Kamna. And just a note, sorry that Dr. Bhagat couldn't be with us this evening. We'd hoped to have him here. Ayush, I'm going to come to you, and not just because I think you're the only one who has a copy of the book to show, but the idea was also, thank you. When we started, brainstorming on titles, we were, it was kind of tongue in cheek to say Age of Anxiety. And I think I've asked all of you in our interviews, do you think it's the Age of Anxiety? And I'm certainly going to ask you that today. Ayushi, you've been really, in the story you shared, and as someone with lived experience, and as someone who set up mental health talks, you've also been kind of excoriating about the way sometimes it comes across as a sort of, I think you call it the pastel aesthetics, the pop psychology we see, especially on social when we talk about anxiety. Can you take us through a little bit about your story and why you wanted to share?
So I wanted to share my story because when I started developing things like anxiety and depression, I did not really have a support system around me. But deep down, I knew that I can't be the only person who's battling all these things. And I'd been to therapy, I'd been to psychiatrists, and even then, like having a sort of a very secure support system, a peer group circle who was there with whom you can just talk about your feelings, and the fact that there is so much stigma that even if you don't believe in that stigma, but there's going to be so much stigma around you that it is going to affect you. And that is, I think, the really horrible part about anxiety. And then I started Mental Health Talks India just to sort of initially create it as a venting mechanism of my own, that okay, I am battling with a lot of stuff right now and I want to talk about it, because I know that I am a millennial and I use social media a lot, and if I can't find my experiences there in any form or in any way, then it's not a good thing for me. And over the years, but it has also sort of changed in a lot of ways, as I have also mentioned in my story, that Instagram specifically, because I work through Instagram, that a sort of aesthetic tends to be created around anxiety, which is that okay, anxiety is supposed to be quirky, or it is supposed to make you intellectual, or it's supposed to be your fun and games. And I really don't think it is, because speaking from my personal experiences, it has been very debilitating, it has been very disabling. I had my first suicidal ideation when I was going through an anxiety attack, and I think we really need to sort of work through those spaces as well. And on a very quick note, during this time when it's just so terrible, because there are so many people around me, so many loved ones of my own who have been battling COVID, and so many people, like you open Twitter and then it's just threads and threads of it. Twitter is like a national COVID helpline of sorts right now. But reading the book, reading people's stories, reading everyone's words has helped me really, like it has just helped me a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We do have helplines and other resources on the website, which we'll also tweet out. It's pinned on the Health Collective timeline as well, for anyone who wants to reach out. Raj, I want to come to you. I mean, I do in this conversation, in the course of the conversation, like the interview, want to ask you a little bit about what iCall has been seeing. You're funding such incredible projects. You have a very, a bird's eye view of exactly what's happening in the country. But you also spoke to us about living with anxiety. And, one of the interesting points was the counterpoint to this, where we're like, oh, look at this pandemic. Of course, it's so normal to have anxiety right now. And you said that's a little bit ironic for you, because it kind of makes it feel like your anxiety was abnormal and kind of perpetuating that feeling and vibe. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I'd been feeling this for a long time, especially initially last year when the discourse around the pandemic and, the reassurance that this is unprecedented. And of course, you are going to feel anxious. It's very much, and, if I juxtapose this with the conversations that we have around stigma, the marking of abnormal or normal is done then by experts. And the vein taken is very biomedical. And so now we have the same experts saying this is absolutely normal, which obviously means that people like me are abnormal. And it's interesting because if we spoke about it more as being an experience, then possibly I would have had more tools to deal with it as a child. um, and as a child now, I know, looking back at my life, that I probably had anxiety when I was really, really young. I mean, I was taken to a clinic and I was made to put shapes into boxes, or I got F's for interaction because I think I was scared of everything and anxious in kindergarten, but it wasn't recognized as such. And partly it has to do with this anointing of things as normal and abnormal.
Yeah, I think, I mean, moving away from that and just realizing that, this is a spectrum, understanding that, we can't look at everything through one lens. I think you've been very vocal about that. Dr. Patari, you've certainly been very vocal also about not, just not looking at things through this one filter, right? Everything is connected as a psychosocial, determinants we need to speak about. I do want to ask you though, because, when I was doing the interview with you, I asked you, are you seeing an uptick in anxiety or people calling in and saying they're anxious? And you said, of course we are. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means? And right now, for anyone who might be watching and feeling that burden, that weight, that uneasiness, what's your message to them?
Well, I don't have any quick fire, easy solutions to offer, but I just thought that every age has its politics. And maybe you should write a sequel to this saying the politics of anxiety, because there is the politics of anxiety. What is appropriate and what is not appropriate, what is socially acceptable or politically acceptable about anxiety. I mean, we talk about the age of anxiety as if it descended on us yesterday. The fact of the matter is that if you are poor, if you are disabled, if you are vulnerable in this country, you had the age of anxiety for centuries. What we mean by the age of anxiety now is that all of us who potentially do not expect ourselves to ever have these kind of difficulties, suddenly realizing that we have these difficulties. For a vast majority of people, anxiety revolves around day-to-day living issues. Going back to Maslow's stuff, anxiety revolves around trying to get adequate amount of food, getting your kids into school, having the money to pay the bills. Now we would call that, oh, that's just normal day-to-day anxiety. It's not normal day-to-day anxiety. It's highly debilitating. It prevents any kind of good quality of life. I think we should also, along with the age of anxiety, we should also be talking about the politics of it, which is, and what I mean by politics is not normal, not narrow party politics, but what I mean by politics is how do we address these anxieties? I mean, what are we doing to address people's needs, which presumably also causes these anxieties? And somehow the definition of anxiety that clinicians tend to use is that you're feeling anxious when there is no reason to be anxious. But what about when you're feeling anxious and so anxious that you're not able to function and there is a reason to be anxious? I mean, isn't that something we should be addressing in some sort of way? That's the question we really should be asking ourselves. That there are many people who go to bed anxious, who wake up every morning anxious, because they may not know where the food's going to come from, or how the kid's going to get to school, or how the bills are going to be paid. I think that's equally an important anxiety. And clinicians tend to say, well, that's anxiety related to day-to-day living. We all have that. It's not always true. We all have that anxiety, but nowhere near what it is for many people. So yeah, I think I don't have a solution to offer. I'm not trying to. I don't think our job at the moment in this discussion would be to try and come up with easy solutions. I would just like people to reflect on the fact that anxiety comes out of many determinants, as you said, and what are we doing about those determinants?
No, for sure. And I mean, yeah, I completely hear you on the no quick fix solutions. Ayushi, I want to come to you. One of the things we wanted to do is, as you mentioned, by sharing people's stories, centering around lived experience, like we always say, you have to see what people are going through. Hopefully that will help when it comes to stereotypes, when it comes to stigma. One of the I wish I thought of sharing this image. I mean, we'd asked this wonderful artist, Advaita, to do some artwork for us on what it feels like to have anxiety. And it was actually a person with sort of barbed wire running across. She was saying that's how it feels every single day, which is the nice, not nice, but a complete juxtaposition of what you were saying, the counterpoint to how we sometimes talk about anxiety. One of the myths that's been, we asked folks for myths and facts as well, and somebody said a myth that they face is that anxiety is not a real problem. Is there a myth that you hear that you would just like to smash right now and just be like, look, we need to be done with this. People need to understand more and just do the work. I mean, it shouldn't be on people who are sort of living through this to have to explain time and again. But any myths you want to smash today?
There are many for sure, and I think we could start with when I talk to people that, okay, right now I'm feeling really, really anxious, or if I'm having an anxiety attack, and then people tell me that, okay, stop thinking about it. And I'm like, if I could, I would. I mean, I have that sort of an intelligence. If I would have been able to stop my anxiety by just snapping out of it, I would do that. But it's not always, and that, because then makes people feel that, okay, nothing like this exists. It's all in your head. You're just overthinking it. But that's not as simple as we would want it to be. It can't be that, okay, I can just snap out of it and I need to, because there's no switch in my brain that I can, okay, right now I'm really feeling really, really anxious and now I can just switch it off. Because if I could make myself feel that, okay, Ayushi, now you're feeling too anxious, okay, switch off that button and now let's not be anxious. If I could do that, that would be just so cool for me. I would just be so happy. But it does not exist. So I think starting off with this myth would be really nice.
And Raj, can I ask you here, because, in the interview, we spoke a little bit about some of the manifestations of anxiety for you. Overthinking is one of them. There are also physical symptoms that come up. Savita saying, well said to Ayushi. Anything you would like to just have us be done with as a myth?
Well, yeah, I mean, I to juxtapose with what I said earlier about normal and abnormal, I do think, however, and people are saying often enough that, yes, I have anxiety, or, oh, I feel anxious. Having it clinically or living with it clinically is very different. And I was laughing earlier today because I take daily medication for this. And over the last 3 to 4 days, I've been unwell, and a lot of my symptoms mimicked COVID. I don't have COVID. I actually have a sinus infection, as I do often enough. I get them maybe once in every 6 months. But I was unable to stop myself from taking my temperature every 5 minutes, from taking my pulse ox every 5 minutes. And I ran down the batteries of both the instruments. And of course, I drove everyone around me up the wall. I also ran my own temperature up. But these are the sorts of things that in the intersections that we don't speak about as much. And those are important because it is then a psychosocial disability. And while you can have anxiety about, say, a talk that you may be doing, it's very different from actually living with it. And these are important conversations, I think, for a variety of arenas, such as workplace mental health, or, as Dr. Pathari was talking about, multiple types of determinants that lead up to these anxieties.
No, for sure. And Kamna, we did, I had the ridiculous idea of trying to distinguish the anxiety in the way lay people use it, as Dr. Pathari pointed out, as Raj just mentioned, with a lowercase a in the book, and then anxiety is a disorder with an uppercase a in the book, and it drove Himanji and the entire team batty in the process. I'm not sure how successful we were with that, so readers just be warned. But Kamna, that's one thing that you've also been highlighting. There are different ways in which we use the language, and there are moments when people need to seek professional help. Do you want to share a little bit about that distinction? Especially, I think today, again, it's maybe more critical than ever.
I absolutely feel that it is far more critical now than ever for us to be able to understand that there is a difference between experiencing the emotion of fear or anxiousness, which is pervasive given the environment that we're currently living in and the social situations that are surrounding us, the familial situations which are surrounding us. And that does not always translate into becoming a full-fledged disorder. I think we need to be able to appreciate the fact that when you're looking at diagnosing something as an illness, there are and I think Dr. Pathare could speak far better on this than I could. I'm sure Dr. Pathare, you would add something to this as well. But we have certain conditions or criteria that we require to be met. When you're looking at diagnosing a clinical condition, we also require you, whether it's the time criteria, whether it is looking at the kind of impairment that is happening, that for an individual in their personal spaces, in their workspaces, in the productivity, how much is it consuming that individual is what becomes the defining characteristic of whether you're going to call it a disorder or not. And there are a number of clinical conditions which exist, which are subsumed within the anxiety disorders, which people are largely unaware of. We typically think of, okay, if I'm thinking too much or if my sleep is getting disrupted, that means I may have an anxiety disorder. But there are varying conditions which exist. And it's very important for us to be able to understand that everything should not get labeled as an illness, because then you're running to experts all the time. And I don't think our field is also currently in that space where expertization of everything would work. We have to be able to distinguish between what can be handled by an individual or with the support of the family, the social network, and which is not an illness, and what is it that would require us to reach out to a mental health expert, given the kind of constraints we have in terms of the number of people that we have available within the country, the disparity or the disproportionate distribution of experts across varying geographical areas. There are a lot of factors that we have to keep in mind as well.
Dr. Pathare, do you want to weigh in there? And you did also speak about this sort of need for a stepped care approach, and how we might need to involve many more people for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just going along with what Kamna just said, I think the thing is that anxiety lies on a spectrum, on a continuum. And in a sense, where you draw the line and say, well, this is now into inverted commas abnormal and needs treatment, versus this is normal and does not need any clinical assistance, is almost naturally arbitrary. Although clinicians will try and make some very specific criteria for it, at the end of the day, they still do remain subjective. When you say it disrupts my life, that disrupts your life will be very different for different sort of people. So in that sense, while they appear to be reasonably objective, they are at the end of the day pretty subjective ways of understanding when anxiety requires some intervention. Uh, the other thing that we don't do very well, and given the fact that we have such a shortage of trained professionals to help people with mental health problems, what we don't do very well are two things. One is we don't pay enough attention to prevention. There are things that we should be doing. If you have a shortage of, say, hospital beds, your best bet is to actually prevent people from falling ill. That's your best chance of being able to use those beds or resources more fruitfully. But we don't invest into prevention, given the fact that it is reasonably inexpensive. That's probably what we should be doing. And the second thing is that we don't take a more nuanced and step care approach. As Kamna was saying, that not everybody needs to go and see a therapist, and not everybody needs to go and see a psychiatrist. And very often, a lot of people who have anxiety or depression or any of those anxiety symptoms can easily be helped by what are called as lay health counselors. We run a large program which is funded by MHI, the Manivala Health Initiative, which really trains peer volunteers to help people in rural areas to be able to deal with things like anxiety. And that doesn't cost anything. It's close to home. And the most important thing, because it is co-located within their own spaces, it is not stigmatizing. It's not something for which you have to go to a clinic and see a doctor. Now, that does not mean to say that everybody is going to be helped only by this, but a vast majority of people will be. And when they are not, and when people have more severe symptoms, then yes, of course, people need to go to a clinician. They need to go to a therapist, or they need to go to a psychiatrist. They may need to take medication. all of that is fine, but it needs to be just like the symptoms of anxiety lie on a continuum. The treatment of anxiety needs to also equally lie on a continuum, and not everybody needs to see the psychiatrist or take medication. And so we need to be really thinking about these two things. One is a continuum of care, and the second thing is what are we doing to prevent people from anxiety, which means are we do we have programs where we train young people how to handle anxiety better? Do we have programs which teach people the kind of things they could do to be able to manage their anxiety better? And that's something that is missing. I mean, we do have a few programs here and there, but what we don't have is a very broad-based preventative program. You see, prevention works best if it is universal. Prevention does not work so well, or at least if you're talking primary prevention, you want to do it universally. At the moment, we don't have these kind of universal programs, and that's really unfortunate because they are inexpensive and they will prevent a lot of costs and expenses down the line as people grow up.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to just pick up on a few of those threads. Raj, can I ask you, when you look at the helpline like iCall, which is, serving an entire country, right, supported by the Mariwala Health Initiative, you've mentioned some of the email call volume, the kind of distress people are calling in with. Can you share a little bit more about that? And, it ties in with some of what Dr. Patari was saying about some of the causes early in the conversation.
Right. So the iCall helpline actually receives calls from very disparate locations, and these could be from a person who lives in a village so tiny that they don't know the district that they're calling from, to Indians abroad who are living in Brussels, and of course, then your major Indian cities. And the iCall helpline has seen a massive spike in the last 1 year. So much so that we had to open up a second line, have volunteers, some of whom who came from example from Saumitra's team, have other mental health professionals actually volunteer for this line. And I think calls came from both sources, people who are trying to grapple with COVID, and then people who live with mental health conditions, who are facing a far more arduous time dealing with COVID. And the solutions, again, the approach that iCall takes is, of course, one is to look at your triggers, but also understanding your triggers better for yourself, and then help you find some solutions to manage those triggers. And then, obviously, I think the more critical thing is linking you to referral networks, and those could be, a mental health expert, but also domestic violence lines or legal lines. And these connections are there. We cannot easily silo the clinical from the social, or from the clinical from the social, from the structural. And so these three things need to be looked at very carefully. And a helpline like iCall actually sees this in all three of those kind of brackets, and hopefully is able to not silo all three. Otherwise, it's very neatly siloed between this is a social thing and this is a clinical thing.
And similarly, Kamna, when you're you've been talking also about how the distress people are coming in or calling in with now, it includes stress about loved ones, relatives. It includes like job uncertainty. There are so many things going on right now. It doesn't seem like there's one thing. I mean, we can bracket it around COVID-19, but it seems like there are many, many, many things there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a host of things which are going on currently, which people are really struggling to cope with. It's the illness in itself. It's the fear of the illness. It's the fear of being stuck in your homes, not being able to connect with your loved ones. It's about fears about their safety. It's about the guilt if you are yourself safe and you know so many people around you who are not okay right now. It's so much about and I think the one thing that we're probably right now not preparing for also is the sense of loss, the sense of grief. the bereavement that people are going to go through in the coming months, which is going to perhaps become the next hurdle, the next big challenge that we're all going to see in the mental health space. Because I think right now we're all in, at least in this current way, we're all in a crisis intervention mode. We're all just trying to take it one step at a time and just doing what we all need to do, and not trying to look at what comes next. But there is a big mammoth problem which is waiting for us, and it's going to hit us all in a very, very big way. It's already begun to hit us all in small ways right now. And like I was stating even at the beginning, that our days, at least in the mental health space, are just about this currently, and it's only going to be something that's going to become more pervasive. And if we are not going to mentally prepare ourselves, if we're not going to equip ourselves to deal with some of these things, I think we'll have yet another huge mental health crisis on our hands in the coming few months.
Just a reminder to anyone watching, if you want to send any questions our way, I'm actually in my hotspot right now. So Abhi, Mridu, if you see any questions, please ping them to us. Let's come to the how to cope. Oh, there, thank you. Open for questions, yes. The how to cope part of this. If there's anything you'd want to share that you think would be helpful. And again, keeping in mind that, some of us are also just doom scrolling, right? Like we're just going on, seeing things and cries for help, feeling helpless, getting overwhelmed, not sure what is the right framework for that. Are there any coping mechanisms you might have found helpful?
I think apart from, say, practical everyday coping mechanisms, because they would vary from person to person and according to what situations they are in, what sort of anxiety are they facing, are they dealing with. I think what has personally helped me a lot is to just remind myself that this is not, like, for the lack of a better word, a quote unquote normal time. This is not something that I have ever been prepared for. In the 28 years of my life, I've never seen a time like this. And it's really difficult just switching on Twitter and just seeing so many requests after requests and just RTing them. It's not something that any citizen is basically prepared for. It is not the work that we need to be doing right now. And it's honestly not our job. We are doing it because we want to help each other out. But just reminding yourself, and then there are a lot of people who would tell you that, okay, just think positive or just try to stay positive and don't think negative. And I don't think that is really possible right now. I can't think positive. I know 20 people right now who are battling COVID. I have been trying to help people arrange oxygen cylinders, beds and everything, injections, whatnot. And this is not a normal time. And just to remind yourself that you are going to be a bit anxious, at least for right now, and just being with that anxiety has helped a lot, because otherwise you would definitely have some or the other everyday things that you can do. If you think you can distract yourself, if you think playing COD or playing Ludo, playing any sort of game helps you, that is great. But just reminding yourself that you need not necessarily run away from anxiety and try to remind yourself that, okay, no, I just need to be positive, happy vibes only. It's not going to happen. And just we need to stop imposing it on ourselves and on others, because it's just a very privileged position to say that okay, you just need to be happy and it will turn into your reality. It's not going to happen. The structural inequalities, the things that are happening on a global level, on a national level, they are going to affect me on a personal level as well. It's, as Raj rightly pointed out, we can't create silos that, okay, this is clinical, this is social, and this is medical or whatnot, and then just create those distinctions and then expect people to work around that. So I think a lot of my anxiety at least suits down by if I just accept that, okay, yes, I am going to be anxious for quite a long time, and it is okay. It's fine. It's not going to be the end of my world, at least.
No, thank you. I'm just smiling. Dr. Patari, is that a pandemic pup? We got a pandemic pup also,
yes.
As Raj knows.
Yeah, you know.
There we go.
This is what you want to have a tip for what helps anxiety. Here is what helps reduce your anxiety. Oh, he's not a very happy pup. He doesn't like to look into the
pandemic pup.
No, sorry. I just learned it was a phenomenon. What I mean is we love our rescues, but what do you make of the phenomenon? If you want to say, why do we not like the phrase?
Who, me? It's not about the phrase as much as the fact that, for those of you who don't know this, my other job is I'm a feline and a canine behaviorist. And so the pandemic puppies that came in last April, May, June, July, I've had an extremely uphill task socializing them. The world that they know is an empty one. There are no sounds, there are no people, and all of a sudden being exposed to people in October, November, December has created a massive spurt of anxious, nervous, aggressive animals, not to mention separation anxiety. So I'm as we as canine and feline behaviorists find ways for people to socialize their puppies, it's not a very good idea to get these puppies in without a very good and solid plan. Because that's what we've been struggling with. Add to the fact that I can't go and physically work with so many puppies as I would have normally done.
Oh God, I think I hijacked that conversation. Now I'm stressed. I'll be
No,
messaging you separately about this.
I kind of agree with Raj completely. We've always had dogs, and we lost our dog about a year and a half ago, and then COVID hit, and it took us a long time to actually make up our minds whether we wanted to get another dog. And we felt it was right now to kind of try and get another one. So we've kind of waited for a while to get it. But I really do think, I mean, I know people think that this is just kind of, oh, animals are good. The fact remains that in many countries, and not so much maybe in our country, but like the universities abroad, for example, do have like dog therapy units, where where students can go and kind of help themselves. Now that's a real challenge for the dogs because they really suffer from anxiety. It's almost like you transfer your anxiety onto the dog. But the fact does remain that there are many innovative ways that one can deal with anxiety. And one of the other things that I would like to tell people really, and I believe this pretty strongly, get off all the media, and I mean television, I mean social media, get off it. Get off your WhatsApp and get off your Facebook. I mean, the problem with WhatsApp is you'll just keep on getting all kinds of random rubbish, scary forwards. And with Facebook, the problem is what Ayushi kind of mentioned, which is that everyone is just happy and pleasant and having a great time. And then you start feeling even worse for yourself because you think I'm supposed to be happy all the time and I'm not able to. So a lot of anxiety is also promoted by social media as well as by our television. So just simple stuff. Get off all of that. Do something else. Go and read a book. Go and reach the age of anxiety. That might be a far better activity to do than to spend half an hour on Facebook, and it will help your anxiety far more than spending time on WhatsApp forwarding stuff that you keep on getting from people. So I do think that media does play a huge role in creating a background of anxiety for a lot of people. I mean, we've never really seriously examined the role of traditional media as well as social media in adding to this entire deluge of anxiety that we have around.
Yeah, I think, and Kamna has some tips on logging off. As you just said, I think we're going to close with some tips, but let's take a couple of the comments and questions. Aruna saying, I think it's also about recognizing you don't have to be a resilience champion. Sharing some of her experience, she turned down a volunteer opportunity to support a COVID helpline, which would involve conveying news of death, etc. But she's happy to help as a person with lived experience to offer to be an ear and shoulder for mental distress. Raj, I'll come to you with that. And Himanjali's comment that you spoke about normal and abnormal as categories, and there's this new normal. Does it help to have these categories? Are we just trying to describe, what we're seeing, or is it best not to create these artificial boundaries?
Well, I would say, again, a lot of us in mental health, we talk about stigma and we talk about, how maybe there's a whole othering that happens with mental illness. And that's something that I want people to be aware of. So what happens when you in a position of power choose to say, oh, this is normal, Therefore, who are you othering? So I think that's one thing kind of to keep in mind. And in the same breath, I will say that I'm really tired of anti-stigma work. All of it follows on one narrative. It's typically a narrative of someone who's urban, upper caste, upper class, who has overcome their mental illness and now is living a successful life. So that's the other normal abnormal binary, right? That if you do not have these markers, if you do not have the markers of being, I don't know, getting your full education, having a job, earning enough XYZ money, maybe having a kid, that's not as normal, right? So, who are we leaving out of this? We're leaving out persons with disabilities, we're leaving out maybe Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi people, we are leaving out queer trans people. So let's think about normal, abnormal, and the new normal in light of axes of marginalizations and what this does for these categories.
For sure. And who's normal? I think Dr. Patari is also saying, right? I mean, we're talking about health systems crashing. He shared earlier today that you're noticing it now because of your privilege. It's always been the case. See, I am slightly stalking you on Twitter there, Dr. Patari. Sometimes it's very amusing to see some of your rants. Okay, Kamna and Doc, how do you recognize and stop anxiety from turning obsessive? Is that Kamna? Can you go, and then maybe Dr. Patari?
I think in current times, it's a really difficult one because we are also stuck in these spaces at the moment where you're either stuck in a room or in a house. You don't have your regular outlets of being able to step outside, go to work, meet different people, and get that shift in your thought process, which would perhaps have been easier had you had access to a lot of that. And I think that's why a lot of people are finding it to be a struggle right now to unplug from their own thought process. And like Dr. Pathare was also mentioning previously, that there are a lot of different things that we can do in order to be able to take care of our own selves. If you are beginning to feel that anxiety, the worriedness which is building up within you, you have to find ways to be able to engage with different things, different in different ways. You will have to stretch your boundaries, whether it is going to be to start dabbling in an art, or whether it's going to be to start finding an active way of maybe going down the cooking route and the hobbies which you've let go of. I think somewhere that really helps, but it's also very important to understand and accept what you're going through. That is one of your foremost ways of being able to also move away from all the anxiousness which is happening. And you have to learn to share. We need to start communicating. There's a lot of hesitation in stating what is it that is troubling me. And and we can currently, I end up seeing a lot of people who feel that okay, I would end up being a burden on the next person because they also have their own emotional experiences currently. And I think it's very, very critical that we find a way to be able to share what is going on with us. And if there is news which is troubling you, if there is information overload which is happening, and that is something that you're struggling with, then it's okay for you to start making a choice about how much do you want to expose yourself to. And you need to start taking a lot of these active measures and steps, even if you feel that you're behaving differently from a lot of other people around you, to be able to take care of yourself. I think some of these basics need to be pushed forward to try and make sure that you are being able to cope somewhat with some of these situations and thoughts that you may be having right now.
Elena, thank you. I love your comment. Dr. Bhagat spoke about slotting a worrying time every few days when you can journal your thoughts, expressive and solution-based, to ease anxious thoughts. Dr. Patari, can you add on to what Kamna was saying as well? And then we have a question for you too.
Well, it is. I find these kind of questions actually extremely difficult to deal with. I'm quite impressed with Kavna, how she's able to. Okay, let me put it this way. There is no one particular solution or one set of things that work for people. I think that these are very individualized solutions that one has to find. They are so dependent on your context. They're dependent on who you are, at what life stage you're in, where do you live in, what is your current circumstances, all of that. It's so contextual that, yes, I could give you a long list of tips, but my answer to that is very often that, look, anything that works for you, and that is something that needs to be found in your context. There are no simple, easy tips. And and honestly, like when people ask me what are the side effects of this medicine, I usually say to them that everything, it ranges from nothing and right up to death, and everything in between. And similarly, with what are the tips for dealing with anxiety, it ranges from everything. You could do nothing and you could do everything. You need to find what works for you. And odd things work for different people. I just don't want people to feel that oh well, if I'm doing this to deal with it, it's not the right way to be dealing with it. I don't think there is any right way to be dealing with it. Whatever moves your boat, basically you kind of do that. And that's really what I would say as a broad general comment.
Perfect. And then just clubbing a couple of questions here. Abhay, thank you. Dr. Patari, you said you don't have to go to a therapist immediately to try and talk about anxiety. Can you elaborate on, that fine line? When do you know when to go and when do you know you don't need to go?
Well, very simple. For example, peer counseling, that's just a very technical name for the kind of stuff that many of your colleagues, your acquaintances, and your friends might be doing for you any which way. It is just that when you do it as peer counseling, you have somebody who's got some basic training and is able to do it in a structured manner because of that training. And usually that happens when you realize that, well, this is not working anymore for me, or I've tried everything and it's reached the limits of it, but I'm still not feeling better. Is when you kind of say, well, okay, I think I've exhausted this option and I need to try the next option of somebody who's slightly more trained than what a peer counselor might be trained. And that's how I would do it. It really depends on if it is working for you, you're feeling better. You don't need to go and see a therapist. Certainly not. Look, we all kind of got this thing about therapy and therapists. The fact remains that vast majority of this country has no access to therapists. How do people get well? It's not like you got a pandemic of anxiety and people are coming out on the street saying, I'm anxious and I don't get help and I'm dying. What happens is that a lot of people get help from friends, from colleagues, from partners. And that's the kind of help we all do rely on all the time. It's when that help is not enough that you go and ask for professional support.
I think, we will have to wind down here. Ayushi, I want to come to you. Maybe the last few words from everyone. Ayushi, there's Abhay, thank you for roping your father in to ask a question. Are social media and TV playing a part in increasing anxiety? I think we heard a little bit from the panelists on that. Ayushi, do you want to take that? And, given the fact that you're able to use social with mental health talks, for example, to connect, especially with the younger demographic, do you want to chat about that a bit?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Dr. Pathare that social media and TV can induce anxiety a lot, because if you look at the news channels and even the way the news is delivered, and if you look at social media and so many people are just out there partying without masks, people are chilling in Goa, and here I am just sitting and just calling random numbers to arrange random cylinders or injections, and it just puts you, even if you are a lot, I know I am really, really privileged, and then it just puts everything into perspective that, okay, things are happening, and it definitely does create a lot of anxiety. But right now, I do also believe that with how Twitter is working, I personally have landed on so many successful leads that have helped people survive, literally survive, because of the leads that we got on Twitter. So it definitely is helping a lot as well. And through Mental Health Talks India, what we also try to do is that I know people, my generation, millennials, are going to stay on Instagram for a long time. And and of course, we do indulge in doom scrolling. We keep on scrolling, and it just ends up in a cycle where you don't know where to stop. Even if you know that, okay, fine, I have heard in a particular webinar, I have heard in a particular session that my therapist has perhaps also told me that, okay, use social media for say 2 hours in a day or whatever. But right now I know it's such a crisis mode and I want to help people out in every possible way that I can. You take up a lot on your own as well. And so what we try to do through mental health talks is to just create content which is going to help people in some way or the other. We are not therapists, we are not clinicians, but we have our own personal lived experience of anxiety and depression. And I think just talking about it, and not only talking about ourselves, but we also know that connecting it to the larger structures of society, how the larger structures of society are affecting all of us right now. It's
Thank you.
so important to just talk about all of that and create those spaces wherein if you see 5 annoying posts on Instagram, and if you just see one post which is going to tell you that okay, it's fine if you're not going to feel extremely positive all the time, it is okay. I think that personally also helps you a lot, and I'm sure it can be a bit good, if not the best.
Thank you. Arpita, thank you for listening in and your comments. Saying exactly social media is invaluable right now. Saying this as someone who's caring for a loved one with COVID. For care providers, social media makes you feel like you aren't alone. As we wind down, and I really want to thank all of you for your time, I'm going to ask you each, are you planning to unplug at all? We're on the cusp of a weekend. Raj, I'll start with you. Any chance of unplugging? Any chance of digital detox? What's something you do that's just me time? Self-care is such a trashed word right now, but you know what I mean. What's something you want to do for yourself that you might do?
Well, partly it's my anxiety that I find it very hard to unplug. The other thing is that, as Ayushi was saying, I think there is a lot of power in social media, and it's been there even pre-COVID. You are getting narratives that challenge the dominant ones in mental health or in many other spheres, and those are important to access. Particularly for me, I've lost the one thing that keeps my brain calm, which is actually working with animals and their humans. And so social media is a space where one has found part refuge, but I am planning to unplug uh, at least, and I do unplug for at least an hour a day or more. And that's only simply because I live with 9 cats and 2 dogs. So I do spend time with my pets, and that is complete unplugging.
Dr. Patare, how about you?
I'm plugged and unplugged all the time, to be honest. I, I don't, I think I would get even more anxious if I kind of unplug from doing everything. It's been a long time now, for years on that. I've never actually followed a weekly schedule. You know what I mean? Like take a Sunday off or something like that. I've got an echo coming here. Um, but yeah, I do take time off in my own sort of way. I don't leave it to a Sunday or a weekend. But I'm like I said, I enjoy what I do. I don't get too worked up, and everything is ephemeral anyway. I'll be gone very soon, and nobody will remember it. So you kind of keep yourself grounded a lot with that.
Thank you for that dose of, yes, you're right. Side effect of life is death. Thank you for that one. I think.
Yes.
Ayushi, will you be unplugging? I know Kamna's answer already, but Ayushi, will you be trying? I know you're doing a lot. I mean, I jokes apart, but how do you take care of that balance for yourself?
I just try to remind myself that I need to definitely, like, as cliched as boring or whatever as it may sound, that I need to just take care of myself first. Because if I fall ill, or if I just get so anxious that I am not able to do anything, then it's of no use. And I can then just keep on scrolling on Twitter and Instagram and all the apps on my phone, and it's going to bring no use. Like, strictly in a very Benthamy utilitarian perspective, it is going to bring no use to anyone. And so I think what I try to do is definitely just take off, like, for like a few hours, maybe not use social media. And then I just like to play games, man. I mean, like, this is a good distraction for me, because then it just keeps me engaged, and I switch on my Call of Duty and I play that for like longer than I should, maybe, I don't know. But right now I'm just keeping away all the shoots and just being and doing what I feel is right.
Thank you. Kamna, final words for you in terms of unplugging. Are you going to give us the? Are you going to be honest? Are you going to give us the right answer?
Yes, of course, I will be absolutely honest. Like Dr. Pathare, I absolutely love the work, so it's very hard to keep fixed hours or fixed days off. But I do unplug and I do a digital detox. I just absolutely believe in that. It's something that has really worked for me over the years personally, where I go off social media altogether. Every day, in fact, for a few hours. Especially the night time, it's my way of just disconnecting from everything and connecting with my family and my friends. That's the time that I utilize to have all of those conversations. And I think unwinding routines is something which has always worked. There are very specific things that work for me. Reading is a must. I do try to keep on adding different activities over the course of time. And for me, art does it for me. When I'm absolutely stressed and not doing too well, then struggling to keep myself going as well. So I think the art really helps. The painting helps. That's something that has always worked. And we all have to find those things for ourselves. It's very, very important, especially in these times right now.
No, for sure. I want to end by thanking you all so much for taking out this hour, for taking out all the time actually to answer all of the questions that we had over the past year, sharing some of your journey, and really for the incredible work that you've been doing. You're just incredible and you're just very inspiring. But before I get very emotional, which has also been happening a lot this pandemic, I will say, if I get too emotional, I will let you go. But deeply appreciate, and I hope that you and your families stay safe and stay well. Thank you to the publishers, and of course those of you who have been watching. If you want to send us some of your questions, you can find all of us on social. I think we've all been tagged, so feel free to reach out. Thank you. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.